In just 2 years, the United States has committed over $100 billion in military and financial aid to Ukraine, aiming to bolster its defense against Russian aggression. But now, President Trump's heated exchange with Ukrainian President Zelensky has shifted the landscape of global relations in real time. These events signal a dramatic shift in how the U.S. interacts with its closest allies. What's at stake? And how will these developments reshape the future of global politics, security, and trade? Let's break it all down. In today's video, we're diving into some of the most intense diplomatic tensions the world has seen in years. From President Trump's heated exchange with Ukrainian President Zelensky to rising tensions with the European Union and Canada, the landscape of global relations is shifting in real time. We'll break down the key events, the underlying causes, and most importantly, what this means for the future of international trade, security, and America's role on the world stage. With $100 billion in U.S. aid to Ukraine and escalating tariffs affecting both the EU and Canada, the stakes have never been higher. Stick around as we dissect the ripple effects these changes could have on everyday life, from the price of goods to the security of our future. Chapter 1. The Trump-Zelensky confrontation. On February 28, 2025, a critical meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky took place in the Oval Office. The primary goal of the meeting was to finalize a mineral rights agreement between the two nations, allowing the U.S. to access Ukraine's vast reserves of rare earth minerals. These minerals, which are essential for the production of advanced technologies like electric vehicles, EVs, and renewable energy infrastructure, are becoming increasingly important in the global transition to green energy. However, what should have been a diplomatic success quickly soured. President Trump accused Zelensky of being ungrateful for the U.S.'s ongoing support in Ukraine's conflict with Russia, stating,
"You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards."
This harsh rhetoric added fuel to the fire of diplomatic tension between the two leaders. To put the stakes in perspective, the U.S. has already provided over $100 billion in military and financial aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion in 2022. With this kind of support at risk, Zelensky pushed back, emphasizing the need for more concrete security guarantees before Ukraine could even consider peace talks with Russia. He pointed to past failures in agreements signed by leaders like French President Macron and German Chancellor Merkel, which were violated by Russia. If the U.S. is unable to secure access to Ukraine's minerals, it could drive up the cost of EVs, solar panels, and other renewable technologies. Consumers may see higher prices for electric cars, solar panels, and smartphones as the cost of raw materials like lithium and cobalt rises. With the global shift toward green energy, this mineral deal was a significant piece of the puzzle. A delay in securing such deals could slow the adoption of clean energy, making it harder for people to transition to more sustainable sources of power and transport. Chapter 2. EU and Canada's immediate response. Following the collapse of the U.S.-Ukraine talks, European leaders were quick to reaffirm their unwavering support for Ukraine. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and Emmanuel Macron, President of France, were among the first to issue statements criticizing Trump's approach, emphasizing the importance of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Kaja Kallas, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, stated, "The free world needs a new leader," was a clear sign of Europe's frustration with the shifting U.S. stance on Ukraine. To put it into context, the EU has pledged over 45 billion euros in support to Ukraine in humanitarian aid, military assistance, and economic stabilization since 2022. European leaders have maintained a solid, unified stance against Russian aggression, despite Trump's increasingly transactional foreign policy, which seeks to extract more tangible benefits from its allies. Canada also weighed in, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reaffirming his country's commitment to Ukraine, despite the growing tension with the U.S. over trade and other issues. Trudeau stated, "Canada will continue to stand with Ukraine and Ukrainians in achieving a just and lasting peace." This commitment reflects Canada's broader foreign policy, which has included over $19.7 billion in support for Ukraine since the start of the conflict. If the EU and Canada continue to align more with Ukraine and against Trump's policies, this could mean that U.S. sanctions on Russia become less effective, leading to continued volatility in energy prices worldwide, especially oil and gas. If you're living in Europe or Canada, you might see increased gas prices and higher utility bills as energy security becomes a more complex issue. With the EU and Canada focusing more on supporting Ukraine's sovereignty, we may also see shifts in the cost of imports, especially tech products, food, and automobiles. If trade agreements with the US start to fray, expect prices to rise for everyday goods like clothing, electronics, and automobiles. Chapter 3: Escalating trade tensions with the EU and Canada. Trump's aggressive trade stance, particularly against the EU and Canada, has added another layer of complexity to the geopolitical situation. On February 26, 2025, Trump announced a new 25% tariff on EU imports, accusing the European Union of being a trade adversary and of unfair practices, particularly in the automotive and pharmaceutical sectors. This came as a response to EU digital services taxes that targeted US tech giants like Apple, Google, and Amazon. The total trade volume between the EU and the US in 2023 was approximately 851 billion euros, with the US importing 347 billion euros worth of goods from the EU. A trade war could have significant impacts, particularly on industries like automotive manufacturing, chemicals, and electronics. Canada is also in the firing line. Trump has continued to impose tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, despite the fact that Canada is a crucial supplier of these materials to the US. For instance, Canada accounts for 19% of all US steel imports, which are vital for American industries ranging from construction to defense. In 2023, Canada's total exports to the US were valued at approximately $592.7 billion, with energy exports including oil and natural gas accounting for nearly 27.9% of that total. Trump's tariff policies threaten not only these critical exports, but also the long-standing trade relationship between the two countries. As a result, Canada and the EU have been exploring retaliatory measures, including targeting iconic US products such as bourbon, motorcycles, and orange juice. If Trump follows through with these tariffs, prices on everyday products will likely rise. Cars, electronics, and even medications could become significantly more expensive as both the EU and Canada export these items to the US. Consumers could feel the pinch when buying not just imported goods, but even domestic goods that rely on imported parts. Manufacturers, workers in the auto industry, and those in pharmaceuticals might also feel the effects, with possible job cuts or slower wage growth as industries adjust to the new tariffs. Consumers who rely on cheaper products might also notice a decline in the purchasing power of their dollar. Chapter 4: The Digital Services Tax and Retaliation Strategies. In response to what they perceive as unfair tax policies targeting their own companies, the EU and Canada have introduced digital services taxes (DST) aimed primarily at large US tech firms. For example, the EU's DST, introduced in 2021, imposes a 3% tax on revenue generated by large digital companies operating within EU member states. The taxes have been a point of contention for the US, with Trump's administration pushing back, claiming that these measures unfairly target American companies. In retaliation, Trump has threatened additional tariffs. This could particularly impact consumer goods, high-tech products, and luxury items, leading to higher prices for American consumers. At the same time, Canada is considering similar countermeasures. For instance, Ottawa has explored adjusting its own digital services tax, potentially targeting US firms more heavily, while European countries like France and Italy are also refining their responses to protect their digital tax systems. Chapter 5: Trump's Controversial Proposal for Canadian Statehood. Perhaps the most inflammatory of Trump's recent statements has been his suggestion that Canada should become the 50th honest state of the United States. In a series of Truth Social posts, Trump argued that Canada is financially dependent on the US, claiming we spend hundreds of billions subsidizing Canada. Why? No reason at all. He suggested that Canada's natural resources like oil, timber, and minerals are underutilized, and that it would be better for both countries if Canada were integrated into the US system. To put this in perspective, Canada is the top foreign supplier of crude oil to the US, providing about 60% of total US oil imports. Additionally, Canada's vast mineral resources make it a strategic player in the global energy transition, particularly for critical materials like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, which are essential for electric vehicle batteries and renewable energy infrastructure. Despite these undeniable economic ties, Canada has firmly rejected the idea of statehood. Prime Minister Trudeau responded, saying it had no chance in hell, and Canadian Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre stated that Canada will never be the 50 honest state. The shifting global dynamics are more than just political chess games. They're directly influencing the prices we pay, the products we use, and the security of the world we live in. From higher costs on everyday goods to changes in energy prices, the future of US relations with Canada and the EU will undoubtedly touch all of us. As international trade wars escalate and diplomatic alliances evolve, we could face more expensive products, job disruptions, and even shifts in the very services we rely on every day. How do you think these geopolitical changes will affect your life? Will we see more trade disruptions, or will the world eventually adapt to a new order? Drop your thoughts below, like the video if you found it insightful, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on these rapidly changing international issues.